Hi everyone, welcome back to a deep dive into the digital divide. I'm your host Sanjana and today we're joined by a co-host, Sarvika.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarvika. I'm the founder and director at TecBridge, and today we're joined by Dr. Young.
Dr. Young is the superintendent of the Forsyth County School System, and today he's going to talk to us a little bit about technology in the education system.
Great, well thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to join you on this podcast and maybe even like a little YouTube action. Is that what I'm hearing today?
Yes,
so Podcast Plus. So this is pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we're so glad that you could join us. And let's just go right into our first question. How do you think AI currently is being used to support personalized learning in classrooms?
Yeah, I think so. So personalized learning itself can be defined in many ways, and I don't want to bore the listeners or the viewers with all the different edu-speak behind personalized learning. I think in our school system, the thing that we make as a priority one is getting to know your students. And personalized learning in that regard means you're building relationships, you're getting to understand the background of students, and you're trying to connect on a very human level. And once that's established and you have a safe learning environment, then you can really dive in. So when we talk about personalized education in Forsyth County, that is first and foremost. Then you go the next step into what we would call like differentiated learning, where you have different modes of delivering information, different activities that some students do better on these activities, some students would do better on those activities. So when it comes to AI in the classroom, it's not new probably in some regards, but in terms of using it as a tool in education, it really is new. And I know you've got some other questions you want to talk about. They get around ethical issues and that sort of thing. So we're really in our system just beginning to scratch the surface and wrap our heads around it. But what I do think at this stage where we're seeing it being effective is those teachers who are kind of consulting with their colleagues and now looking at AI as someone to consult with just for ideas on differentiation, for ideas on lesson building. And I've taught this lesson this way for the last 10 years. They'll go into AI and ask for some alternative ways of delivering, and those, and I dare say some of our, I won't say younger, but some of our newer teachers are a little bit more comfortable going in that direction. They're a little bit averse to fears of technology, and so I think we're just starting to see that on the planning side of things.
Yes. Well, I know you mentioned ethical issues because AI is so new, and we don't understand a lot of it yet. So, what ethical concerns do you think are emerging with the use of student data to train educational AI models that might be integrated into classrooms?
Well, and again, there's the student data piece. That's almost a separate issue. I mean, because when it comes to student data, we are bound in public education by such strict rules. You've heard of FERPA, that protects student data and student records and privacy rights. So that limits a lot of what we can or will do with AI, because we have got to keep as part of that safety piece we said is a huge priority. We've got to make sure we protect identities and protect demographic information and that. So that, any sort of app, AI or just learning app that's used, we have a whole vetting process that before a teacher is allowed to even use an app, it's got to meet a certain level of cybersecurity before it can even be used to protect you in that regard. So as AI continues to go on, that's one ethical, legal issue that's got to be considered. But in terms of using it to develop plans or using it in the classroom, I think for me one of the biggest questions that has yet to be answered, because when you're using AI, it's pulling from a gajillion different sites and posts and things. I think the question for me that hasn't been answered is where is it pulling its information, and will different AI platforms have different hidden agendas? And we're living in a world right now, and you guys know this, you feel it as much as I feel it. Everything that's said, even that someone will watch this YouTube or listen to this podcast, and they'll try to determine what our political angle is right now. Because everything in our world is so, it's the politicization of everything is so magnified. And so one of the questions that's out there is when you're using AI and it's generating lessons or thoughts on how to answer an essay question or all the different uses that we're seeing in education right now, is where is it pulling it from, and is the place that it's pulling it from have an agenda, so it's populating, the AI, I don't know what you would call the AI generator, but where it's generating that, is that coming from a particular angle? Mm-hmm. And if that's ever just, if it's ever determined that, oh my gosh, it's trying to push people into the far right or the far left of the political spectrum, or into a pro-Christian or pro-Islamic or pro-whatever, and a religious sense, like those things are all potential moral dilemmas that are going to be presented out there if we don't get a better understanding of where exactly the information is coming from.
So is that a question that you feel needs to be answered before, you feel like it's safe to put AI into classrooms?
Yeah, I do. I think it's something to be cautious. We should never let perfect get in the way of progress. Mm-hmm. So if we're waiting for the perfect answer, sometimes you can only discover things as you go. But I think as you go into anything as new and as, literally, life-changing as this can be, I think I would be the voice of proceed with caution into that.
Yeah. Right, and that's a huge thing, mostly with all the ethical concerns that so many people have. And a few minutes ago when you talked about the apps that we're using in classrooms, one AI-related app that I used in my AP Computer Science class was actually an AI interview chatbot that we were using. So you can use your voice to talk to them, and it basically helps you prepare for those mock interviews we do in our pathway testing. Yeah. So that would be one really useful way that I used AI in my classroom.
Right.
So what do you think are different ways that we could integrate AI 10 years from now in a classroom?
Well, and so when you ask about the classroom of 10 years from now, ask AI. I'm not sure. I'm not, as the technology changes so rapidly, and I can remember going to a workshop, it was pre-pandemic, so probably 5-6 years ago. And at that workshop, they played this video. The jobs, that public educators are preparing their students for won't even exist in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so here we are 5 years later, and that's already true. So to try to project what that looks like, and what does an AI-driven classroom look like in 10 years? I'm not sure, because of all these unanswered questions. I'm not sure where I even hope to see it go. Mm-hmm. Where does it go? Here's one thing I don't think will happen, and I know this is something that has a lot of people afraid out there. I think there's this fear that AI is going to replace teachers, and I just don't think that's going to happen. I think at the end of the day, one of the lessons we learned out of our time in the pandemic is that when you take away the human interaction piece, and when you take away that relationship piece that you get every day one-on-one with a teacher versus learning from the online or learning from a distance. Now that works for some people, and we've got great virtual options that are out there. But for the vast majority of our students, they need to go and have that human interaction and build those relationships and learn to communicate effectively person to person. Mm-hmm. And that can't be facilitated by a bot, right? We're still going to need teachers. Now, the most effective teachers are going to join us in conversations like this to try to figure out uses for AI, like helping teachers, develop an IEP plan for students, right? To get some ideas that are out of the box. Great. To drill and prepare for mock interviews. That's phenomenal. So I think more and more of those things will pop up. There are going to be really good uses for that. Mm-hmm. That I think 10 years from now, that'll be instead of workbooks, and worksheets and the busy work things. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to help us eliminate the busy work and get to, really, really useful things. So I'm excited about that, but cautiously, because we want to make sure that any of those things are, meet the moral, ethical standards. Mm-hmm. I think out of the gate, what has teachers sort of on their heels and administrators and even some parents is that it's so easy to just throw a topic in and let a ChatGPT write an essay for you. And what you lose in that is the ability to think critically for yourself. and there will be problems that you encounter at the workplace and your family dynamics or whatever. It's going to take your own human thought process and resilience and perseverance and problem solving abilities that are embedded in the things that we do in school. You don't see them overtly, but when you're working out those word problems or you're dealing with dilemmas in your social studies class or whatever, those are always going to be around. And if you just turn those over to to an AI that you don't know anything about the background or where they're coming from, whatever, you're not thinking for yourself. And at the end of the day, your own worldview, your own religious beliefs, your own philosophical beliefs, those have to come into play with how you problem solve and answer things. And so I don't think AI should ever replace that.
Yeah, and I know there have been some discussions about like it maybe being more efficient and also safer if teachers are taught how to use AI first to then teach students prompting. Like that's something we do in our business class. My teacher taught us how to create like effective prompts to put in ChatGPT that will give us the sources we need.
Right.
But then we still have to go research those sources. So
and that is so good. I mean that's a teacher who's on the cutting edge and knows the perils and the benefits of AI and using it appropriately. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I know it's a little hard to talk about the future of AI and what that looks like, but there's still some issues currently in our society. So like educational inequality even within Forsyth County. So how do you see AI? Do you see AI as a way that can help educational inequality within our area?
I think so. I think particularly when you get into things with students. All right, so let's look at. I hate to characterize students in three groups, but just for argument's sake, let's just talk about. You've got students who just tend to struggle. All right, and some of those struggles may be tied, to the issues that would show up in an IEP plan. There could be some disabilities involved. There might be there may be some physical things that are involved. So, getting out of the box for how we've always thought about how to close the gap in that regard. I think generating ideas and activities is going to be good there, which is all about bringing people up to that. What we never want to do is lower a bar. That's the sin of soft expectations, right? And some people think, well, there's students who can't do. No, you just haven't figured out a way to get them there. So this might help you figure out ways to help get them to that high expectation you have. We also have students sort of at the other end of the extreme that you don't want to hold back if they can accelerate. And sometimes as a teacher, you're trying to keep everybody at the same pace and at the same level. But if you've got those students that can accelerate, you really need to develop some enrichment activities that they can go beyond and continue to be challenged. And there again, this is an opportunity. That's not so much an equity issue that you're talking about, but I sometimes think there's an inequity when you hold people back to a standard rather than allow them to flourish. And so this, I think, will help that acceleration process, for them as well. So, it all comes down to sometimes how people define equity and equality and that sort of thing. I'll just tell you, and this will stir somebody up out there if they hear this, but I have always believed in equity when it originally meant, that you're providing an equal opportunity or launch pad with high expectations for everybody to reach and strive and achieve. What I don't believe is this modern redefining of equity that means everybody has an equal outcome. Because your work ethic, your family dynamic, there are going to be things. There's going to be some folks that have, a job that pays this, and some folks that have a job that pay that. There's going to be some folks that decide to go into a career where you work with your hands, and some folks that go into a career where you're working with ideas or people. And that should be open. But because our society has put a dollar value on things, we've gotten into this game where we feel like we're doing folks wrong if we don't have an equal outcome. And I'll be honest, that's just un-American. I mean, that's you're not to get too philosophical, but our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, our founding document, were all about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not life, liberty, and the guarantee. So there's ownership that's got to go in that. But when it comes to public schools, our job is to make sure that we give everybody a launch pad to be able to pursue their American dreams. And if their launch pad is disproportionate in any way, then we've got to do everything we can to give them an equal opportunity to take off. And that's for me where equity comes in. And in those areas where students are struggling or are being held back from their acceleration, I think AI is going to be a wonderful tool to help us bridge those gaps.
And I love how you said bridge the gap, because that's a huge thing that TecBridge does. We make sure to bridge the gap for the digital divide by providing technology. So that's a huge thing that resonates with everyone that's watching and listening to this.
Great.
And I also love how you stated that AI could be a great launch pad. And I was wondering, was there anything specifically or something new that you wanted to see that AI or technology could bring into classrooms?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one thing specific. Again, to folks in the tech world, they're probably looking at me like, what a dinosaur. All right. But I've been in the business now 27 or so years. And so, not a dinosaur. I think if you're going to be a really effective leader, and I think our best educators are leaders, just as I believe our best students are being prepared for leadership. If you're going to be a great leader, you have to have what I would call learning agility or leadership agility, which is even more than just adaptability, but you've got those characteristics that help you take experiences from the past, and now that you're leading in a new context, or in this case, there's a brave new world that we're trying to figure out what they are. You got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to adapt is a part of it. But you've got to be able to think in different ways, and I think at the root of that are things like reflection and seeking feedback and input. Sometimes it may be teachers asking students who are more equipped with this to help them understand it. So, I think this world we're going into is really, really exciting because of the opportunities it has for bridging the gap, because of the opportunities it has for acceleration. Because I think it can help teachers, when used effectively, be more efficient, helping them grade essays, perhaps, helping them design, differentiated activities. So I'm excited about it, but I'm cautious, and I don't know if that's the dinosaur in me, but I just don't think we can give a fully developed picture quite yet of what it's going to look like.
Yeah. And, I know, like, the future is very vague, especially because, like I said earlier, AI, like, we really don't know anything about it. But I know you also mentioned earlier that, students and newer teachers are definitely more adept at using AI and are more, open-minded to using AI in classrooms. And so, how do you think that specifically students can help the school system to understand more about AI and maybe incorporate AI into classrooms?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, conversations like this, very candid conversations. There's no hierarchy here. I mean, I'm learning as much from you guys, and you're learning kind of maybe a little bit more of the philosophical viewpoint, but you're on the ground. And so I think, when we talk about the learner profile, you talk about the leadership or the leader profile, these are the two things that guide our teachers, students, employees, everybody in this county. If you look up, you can see them hanging on the wall, as we sit here. But the foundation really of both of those is the idea of building relationships, not just so that we have this, warm and fuzzy, kumbaya atmosphere where we all hold hands and, we love our teachers and love our students and our schools, which is great. But we want those relationships so that we can leverage those to get better. Those relationships allow us to collaborate. When we truly collaborate, then innovation comes out of that. All right, so that collaboration and then the innovation, but then the third element of that is accountability. And that's where the caution part comes in to say, okay, as we go forward with this, let's stop and assess where we are. But that collaboration involves not just it's not a dictatorship in the classroom, or shouldn't be. It's not a dictatorship in the school system, nor should it be. It should involve bringing together all the different stakeholders who are involved, which are the students first and foremost, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, everybody with the business community, bringing everybody together. People won't come together if you don't have authentic relationships. And so that's why those relationships are the foundation of everything. And when those relationships are built between you and your teachers, you can stay after class, sometimes right in class, depending on the teacher and how they roll in the classroom. But with those relationships, you can start to talk about things like this that can generate a lot of information and a lot of give and take and broaden the thinking of the teachers as much as it broadens the thinking of the students. But as students, and if there's students watching this, that relationship building is a two-way street. It can't be all the teacher. Like, you've got to meet the teacher. That they'll go 3/4 of the way. You at least got to take a couple steps towards them, and give them the same benefit of the doubt that you want them to give you when it comes to things, and establish that relationship and really begin to develop a collaborative atmosphere.
That's amazing, because I think a huge point of doing this podcast and doing this video was just to make sure that people knew what the integration is with AI and technology into Forsyth County schools, or in just schools in general. So just one final last word to all our viewers watching and Forsyth County students. How would you say, with respect to responsible usage of AI and technology, should they go about doing this?
Well, educate themselves, number one. Because here's the thing. It's not a matter of, are we accepting AI or not? AI is here. And anybody who's still of the mindset that, well, I'm not sure that we're ever going to go. Oh, no. I mean, it's not a question. It's about getting educated. Whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a student, a parent, get educated about what it is. Start to dig in those things that I said that I have concerns about, that I'm trying to understand where the information is coming for different topics, so that you're aware of backgrounds. But it's here. So it's now a matter of, how do we make best use of this so that we can be, more effective, number one, in what we do, and potentially even more efficient in doing the effective. And, I actually think it's pretty exciting. I was in the classroom, this will tell you how old I am, but when I started as a teacher, 1996, 97, I think was the first year I ever taught a class, the internet was a brand new thing that most public schools didn't have. Now, my first teaching job was at Florida State University High School, which was right on Florida State's campus. So I could take my students to the FSU library, and oh my gosh, my 10th graders were ahead of the game, because we would go in there and the librarian would come out and teach them how to do a search on this computer, that Boolean operators, I think they were called, and you had to search for football plus Florida State. You'd have to put all these plus signs in there for it to search keywords and all that. That was brand new, and there were teachers that I were working with, like, why would you take your students over there? That you're just exposing them to a mess. They're never going to use this internet for anything educationally. And so here we are.
Yeah. That must be such a full circle moment, because you started with your teaching career with the introduction of the internet, and now it's like the AI introduction. It's driving a lot of things. So and I'm not going to say that makes me feel old, because the technology's happened so fast. It's happened while I'm still very, very young. It's still happening.
I guess it's just going to keep growing from here.
No doubt. But I really appreciate that you guys are leading the way in educating folks on this and getting them thinking about the right things with this. And keep on keeping on.
And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This was really beneficial for not only us, but I'm sure for anyone that's listening, parents, students, teachers, anyone, because you can always be more educated.
Well, thank you so much. Great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Once again, I'm your host, Sanjana and Sarvika. Thank you for listening.